really happy to talk to Ryan from the ForHumanity Center. Ryan, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you and your organization does?
Thank you for having me, Yvonne. My name is Ryan Carrier. I'm the executive director of For Humanity, which is a nonprofit public charity established in late 2016 with a singular mission. And that singular mission is to examine and analyze downside risk associated with AI, algorithmic, and autonomous systems. So that's the scope of where we do our work, where we do our analysis and examination. But we want to take technology where it is, where it comes from. And part of what we're going to talk about today is pausing and prohibiting certain AIs. We would rather take the tools where they are and engage in the maximum amount of risk mitigations. So in terms of the mission, we examine and analyze downside risk of AI, algorithmic, and autonomous systems, and engage in risk mitigations. Because the more risk we can mitigate from these tools, the better the possible benefit is for humanity. And so that's where the name came from when I established this in late 2016 after a 25-year finance career.
Ryan, I just had a real quick question, which I didn't think of beforehand. But you obviously founded the organization in 2016, where the AI, which was available at the time, and the automation was vastly different to what we see today. Could you just talk a bit how the work changed, or maybe it didn't? Like, I don't know, but like the risk mitigation right now, when the AI can pretty much do everything themselves, I think it's a bit more serious.
Sure. So the nature of how this came about, so you have to understand the background of why I would start such a thing. I had this 25-year finance career, the last 8 years of which I ran my own hedge fund. Now, in running a hedge fund, what I have to share with you is that it's something I survived but didn't thrive at. Now, I tell you that for two reasons. Number one, and I know I've got a virtual screen up here, but the chair I'm sitting on is a real chair. It's not stacks of cash. And the reason that I share that with you is to understand that it's the work that's being done here is not because I became so settled in my life that I could focus on charitable work. Not at all. In fact, what happened was when you survive a hedge fund, it means you have to close the hedge fund. When you close the hedge fund, it means it's a duty that you have, but it's not a full-time job. So Yvonne, I had time on my hands. We built AI to help us manage money in the hedge fund. So I had great familiarity with AI and have for years. But the most important part of this story with this time on my hands and this knowledge of AI is I have two boys. And in 2016, they were 4 and 6 years old. And I was kind of examining the landscape. I come from a risk management background. Examining the landscape of the risks that artificial intelligence and autonomous systems were delivering to the marketplace and extrapolating that out into the future for my boys. And I don't mind sharing with you, I got scared. Scared enough that I started a nonprofit public charity with no money and no plan. It was just that mission statement. And so what that should help you to understand and appreciate is that the problems that we may be tackling today in 2023, we had plenty of problems back then. We had artificial intelligence beginning to influence democratic institutions. We like voting. We had issues and challenges around just the well-being of our population in using social media and tools like Facebook and how they were taking in information. Many of those things remain today. And so I think from a job perspective, from the mission perspective, more people are familiar with the risks of AI, but they're also equally more familiar with AI in general. And so the scope of what we do has largely increased, but the nature of what we do hasn't changed at all. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, definitely. And I think this leads us to, like, again, the scope and the familiarity of the AI has increased so much, like the OpenAI's ChatGPT 4, that people are actually really scared right now and asking to hold the AI process. but I heard a lot of um, thoughts about it. But the fact that the 6 month timeline to hold the AI development is kind of short. But anyways, what are your general thoughts on the whole thing of the AI and the open letter, which was going all around in April?
Yeah. So let me be very clear. I fully agree with the intent of the letter. And the intent of the letter is that there are risks in the being introduced from these powerful artificial intelligence, LLM, LMM tools, especially with GPT-4 now coming into the marketplace. So I agree that there are risks associated with this. ForHumanity did not sign the letter. We did not sign the letter because we don't agree with the point. With the implementation. So we agree with the intent. The implementation doesn't make much sense to us. You've kind of already hit it then. What would you do with 6 months? What is the enforcement process? 6 months from today or from whenever the letter was signed is picking winners and losers. It's basically saying if you've already got your tool out, you win. And if you don't have your tool out, you lose. These aren't the approaches that ForHumanity takes. ForHumanity takes technology where it is and says, let's try to implement a whole bunch of risk mitigations to each one of those technologies. And so as we think about the intent of such a letter and these concerns, what we want to do is we want to find ways to better mitigate those risks and to implement specific risk mitigations, which is what we do with independent audit of AI systems.
Not to get too political, but I heard an opinion that the reason it's 6 months, and the letter is primarily European and American based, as far as I understand. The reason that it's 6 months is to not let China catch up in the new AI's arm race, which some people see. I'm not sure how much I agree with it, what I know, because I'm not even sure how fast the AI development cycle is to create such big models. I'm not sure 6 months would make a huge difference for any country to actually catch up. Again,
Yeah,
maybe.
let's be clear. 6 months is purely arbitrary, and even the signers of the letter would agree with that, right? There's no difference between 6 months and 7 months or 5 months or even 1 year, right? It's all a sliding scale. Again, the intent is right. We need more guardrails. We need more safety. We need more rules in place, transparency, disclosure, so on. Behind the scenes, there are definitely politics. There are national security concerns. There's competitive concerns. Those are beyond the scope of what ForHumanity can focus on. So unfortunately, I wouldn't have much to say on that sort of an AI arms race per se.
Sure. Also, which risks do you focus on most in your work for humanity?
Sure.
Well, let me extrapolate what I mean by risks. I feel that AI is the technology which can which will and already does transform our daily lives in multitude of ways. And obviously, as you said, it can influence democratic institutions, it can influence elections, it can influence again workflows, as we talked about. Like I had my workflows changed quite a bit in order to suit to stay competitive on the marketplace. Doing marketing, my workflow changed. But for me personally, I believe that the market forces and the world forces will equal out, and the AIs will not destroy the humanity. And if you listen to some people, some signers of the letter, say it can lead to further war, it can lead to slow degradation and eradication of humankind in the future, obviously not now. And those are scary perspectives. But for me personally, I take it a bit as a doom saying. And my fears are that it's gonna change how people absorb information. So my fears are biological and psychological in nature. that education will go down, people will slowly become accustomed to being less inquisitive on their own and just delegate everything to the AI system. So those are my personal fears. And like, what risks is for humanity mostly? Like,
so there's kind of two ways for me to answer that. The first way is to focus on the nature of the risks that we try to mitigate through independent audit of AI systems. And those can be defined in 5 ways: ethics, bias, privacy, trust, and cybersecurity. It's a holistic way of looking at negative outcomes or negative impacts to humans from these tools. We identify them specifically as risk inputs and indicators, and then we work towards specific risk mitigations and treatments. So that's one way of approaching it. Another way of thinking about it is kind of the larger societal, and ForHumanity explored these things when we were first formed. We looked at the future of work. We looked at technological unemployment. We looked at the nature of rights, the rights and freedoms in this 4th industrial revolution. We considered data. Is data something that each person should own and monetize for themselves as part of privacy protection and the value of data? And then finally, we considered even the risk of transhumanism, taking these tools and machines and sort of breaching a barrier, which is outside going inside of our bodies. All of these present risks, whether it's the independent audit of AI systems risks or these more existential societal-wide kinds of risks. Now, I think it would be foolish of us not to recognize that the whole nature of why you implement a tool is because it's more efficient than the existing human work. No one is going to implement a tool unless it is going to replace jobs. That's the point. Replacing jobs doesn't mean necessarily eliminating jobs. It might be that you create new opportunities. So those who are proponents of these tools often identify, well, new jobs, descriptions, responsibilities, duties are created for humans by implementing these tools. And ForHumanity is a perfect example of that. ForHumanity is establishing an ecosystem where we are training people to be independent, human independent auditors of these tools. That job didn't exist 5 years ago. So that's a creation of jobs. We also have built into our ecosystem the requirement for diverse input and multi-stakeholder feedback, which is people, humans, who are trained to analyze the associated risks with the tool and provide feedback on the riskiness of. That's another job that, let's say, didn't exist before. So totally support the idea that new jobs will be created. Then we have to ask the question a little differently. Well, what's the net, right? We're going to eliminate some jobs. We're going to create some new jobs. Do we have a problem? Our general task, it would seem, from an efficiency, from a capitalistic point of view, is to increasingly eliminate jobs over time. And so, and you hear this talk all the time of, well, we want to get rid of the mundane jobs. We want to get rid of the jobs that people don't really want to do. And that's fine and all well and good. But what it will do is it will reduce the sum of all human tasks over time. And it will likely result in higher levels of unemployment. It may be by choice. Okay, people may choose and say, look, I'm happy to just get something from the government just to survive. And if I don't have to work, then great. And we will have to see how that plays out. The one thing that I will share with you, however, is I do think that work is valuable for human well-being. Participating in your own survival, how you feed yourself, how you take care of your family, builds your sense of purpose, your sense of identity, and your sense of well-being. And so if we increase the number of persons who are not doing work and are just receiving handouts from the government to survive, and they might be nice handouts, we might be very profitable as a society and generate a lot of wealth that we can then hand to people who aren't working. That is a possibility. I would argue, however, that the well-being for those people who are not working is probably being sacrificed, and it's something we need to be prepared to deal with.
Well, I think that's something we're already seeing, and not with an AI, but rather in more grander scale of the society. And I used this as an example in one of my talks before. During the caveman times, if we go way back, a hunter going outside of the cave and killing the deer and bringing it back home to the tribe was the whole purpose of his existence. But it filled him, and the level of even like biological levels, how it changed his hormone levels, is probably unachievable to modern day humans because everything is so comfortable, and even in the jobs we have right now. Um, there is little fear of even losing it, arguably. Like, obviously, some people like their jobs, but the point is there's the welfare state. So, in most developed countries, in one way or another, you will be fine. So, you're like, so in this sense, AI, the further simplification of like your life can lead to what I think you're saying. And another point I wanted to mention. You said about jobs. Well, again, going back to my workflow, for me as the marketer, I don't have one singular skill which I carry out. Like even working with my team and especially remotely after the COVID virus, uh, I was just thinking about it the other day. My work was essentially working with virtual people anyways. I would text them and I would get the response. So my text is the prompt, their response is like whatever, right? So there are parallels to this. And it didn't affect me in this sense because I'm kind of overseeing the system, overseeing the workflow, right? But what about the people who, like 3D modelers or programmers or artists, their skill, their job which they enjoy doing because this is art. Like when we thought about AI, we thought like that it's gonna replace like blue collar jobs. So like manual task, manual labor. But instead it replaced the creative ones. And again, people lose some meaning in like being a 3D model artist. But now you can have an AI just scan the object and voila, and like nerve technology, and it's like made within seconds.
Sure. And I think what you're getting at is that the measurement of well-being is a personal calculus, right? I have certain skills. Well, if those skills are no longer needed by society in the marketplace, I will feel like my value has decreased. I might be happy to sit on a beach. I might be happy not to do some work, but it may not fulfill me completely because the measurement of well-being is so complex. There's literally thousands of variables that will pour in on if my well-being has increased or decreased relative to where I was, let's say, 5 years ago. That's the difficulty with all of this, is it becomes easy calculus for the company to say, I used to have to employ somebody that cost me $100,000 a year. I don't have to employ them now. And the cost of running this machine is $5,000 a year. I've saved money. Well, your well-being as the stakeholder, as the shareholder, as the owner of that company has increased. But what's happened to the person who no longer has that job? Well, it could have gone up or down, but we don't know. Okay. And so we have this mismatch of measures of well-being that are all tilted in favor of corporations and shareholders to essentially increase automation. And so we have to be very careful about the erosion of societal well-being and what that means in the long run. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, that's again echoing what I was saying. I, as the owner of my agency, I oversee the process. To me, as you said, it's clear. Like, okay, so I can save costs here, but just like not having to have the copywriter work, but just go to ChatGPT and do like a few like 30 minutes of prompting. There you go, month's work done, right? So it's an easy solution for me, but for the people actually doing those jobs, it's an existential crisis. And that's one of their fears. And again, as you mentioned, you had like a lot of fears which scared you. And maybe you could talk about what scares you. What are your main fears for the AI? Maybe not when you started, but right now. What are the dark side of the AI which you see?
We have too much concentration. There are too few people who are making the decisions about artificial intelligence, algorithmic systems, autonomous systems, how they're being used, when they're being deployed. Um, the challenge associated with that, I refer to this as technology as an autocracy. So OpenAI can produce ChatGPT, GPT-4, whatever, and each one of these companies can produce whatever tool. Society doesn't actually get a real chance to say, maybe that tool shouldn't be produced. And we suffer from an enormous amount of automation bias. We see new things and we think, wow, that's cool. Wow, I want to use that. Let's incorporate that. It'll make my life easier. It's an efficiency argument without ever really seeing or evaluating the consequences. And so the process by which we engage in new technology is very risky. And I think those risks are increasing. Those risks then start to veer over into those risks that I identified under independent audit of AI systems, where I would say, look, there's questions of ethical applications of these tools. Number one, and I'll continue with the ChatGPT theory. ChatGPT is not sufficiently reliable in terms of its outputs in regards to truth and facts. So now what we do is we take all information that's out there and we increase it exponentially. And a lot of that information is not good quality information. In fact, it might be misinformation or disinformation. And that makes it actually harder for people to understand how to take that information and turn it into knowledge and wisdom. So that presents a problem. We're basically flooding the marketplace with information, and we don't necessarily know how to turn that into knowledge and wisdom. So that's one challenge we face. We've already seen people die as a result of these new technologies. Not a lot, but one death, two deaths, stalking incidences, using these tools to replicate humans and create identity fraud. We're already seeing harms in the marketplace produced from these different tools. And they're oftentimes things that could be avoided, not perfectly. No tool will be perfect. People will engage in misuse of a tool and therefore commit fraud or malfeasance, do things that are wrong that cause problems for people. That's always the case. But the question is are there steps that we could have taken to mitigate those risks in advance? So I think really the concentration of who owns these tools, and by the way, the groups that own these tools, and I'm putting them in the marketplace, they're talking a nice game about what they should be doing, but they're not doing it. And that's where I have a great problem. And in those particular cases, we have three ways to change corporate behavior. Governments can regulate and enforce, and they're behind. Lawyers can sue for damages. It changes the cost-benefit effect and will change the nature of how tools are implemented to ensure a higher profitability state with more safety in place. So, and that's a catch-up game. That's an after-the-fact game, and that's also when harms have already occurred. The third way is to educate the consumer marketplace to basically say, I demand safe and responsible tools, and I will not buy or use irresponsible and unsafe tools. And when that marketplace, when we have an educated marketplace that demands those kinds of solutions, then we make safe and responsible AI applications profitable, and we drive a better and more secure environment. We see this with products all the time. The first cars that were in the marketplace were very dangerous. They had bad brakes. They had small wheels. They would fall apart, right? And over time, we improve the safety. We improve testing. We improve evaluation of all of these tools, and we make it better over time. The same will happen with artificial intelligence, but we're at the very beginning. We're at the level of the first 5 cars in the marketplace. and how unsafe they might have been for the first drivers.
But I think you've touched upon it, that okay, so the AI is the tool. It will become only better with time as it's improved and integrated upon. But the bad intent of the bad actors who use it is a danger. And I'm not even talking about right now singular entities who have control of the AI, but I was just thinking about Trump arrest, but not the actual one which happened. But a few weeks ago, there was a viral photo of him made on Midjourney 5 of him actually getting arrested. And it went into the news even somewhere. And I'll be honest, as a person who is not that much interested in what's going on with Trump, or like I don't live in USA, so American presidential elections like are of mild interest to me. But because of that, I saw it, I scrolled past it, and I believed it. I believed, oh, he was arrested. And so the amount of people, if they want to, will be able to manufacture news, manufacture stories, or create false misinformation, that's becoming really dangerous. And whether we will even be able to separate real events from the AI events, or like I'm not sure how the technology works. I know some AI want to implement some sort of markers that the content was created by AI, especially for artistic ones, because there's also copyright claims which done with it. But this is one of those things which are scary to me, how it can influence public opinion and stocks and trading. Again, like if somebody just makes an AI tweet by Elon Musk, I mean, like he can like thank his company, for example.
So deepfakes are an enormous danger to society, and they impact vulnerable populations more because they don't have tools, resources necessarily to identify deepfakes and to therefore evaluate the difference between information and misinformation or disinformation. So it's extremely dangerous. There's literally no excuse for the providers of these technologies to not require an indelible, uneditable watermark and identifier of this content as manufactured. That would eliminate vast majorities of deep fakes right there. And there is no excuse for technology, the technology and the providers of these technologies not to be required to do that in a way that does not allow the user to modify it. Now, fraud and malfeasance, sophisticated users of these technologies can and will defeat those systems, and they will provide further mis and disinformation. But this is an important step. Much of this misinformation, when it's coming without the requirements that I just made of you have to watermark, you have to identify it as manufactured content, okay? That would get the vast majority of this content out of the way so that we can focus on those who are truly trying to defeat the system and therefore trying with intent to create real misinformation and disinformation on a massive scale and trying to affect bad change, okay? And so then we can move to an enforcement world where those are looking at these as criminal acts, and therefore just as the same as we would try to prevent murder or kidnapping or you know other bad crimes, we would have the same sort of technology policing system that's looking out for a far less number of malfeasant attempts to misinform. So these are the steps we have to take so that we can deal with the power of what these tools can build, the amount of misinformation and disinformation that they can create, and how we can then begin to deal with it. But we also have to train all people to overcome automation bias. They have to recognize that the ability to create untrue content has increased massively. And therefore, people have to approach it with a higher degree of skepticism to ensure that the content they're looking at is truthful.
Right now in the world, there is huge levels of economic and technological inequality. Even in countries which are relatively developed, Russia, for example, 50% of it doesn't have even gas provided, which is on high levels of technology. And then we're talking about the whole areas of Africa and poor areas of China, Asia, more importantly, South America. And AI is going to speed up the technological race between those who have it and who don't. What do you think about the inequality as one of the worldwide technological inequality? And as you say, like, even if, say, the citizens of the developed countries, developed Asia, Europe, America, will have access to AI and to ability to distinguish automation and be educated about it, what about, again, vast areas of the world which probably won't for many years to come, just because they still don't have like the basics of the technologies which we use daily?
Yeah, all of these tools will exacerbate, they will increase that income and knowledge inequality. And that is something that we have to work and fight against, because all of these groups I would categorize as vulnerable populations, and they deserve a higher degree of support to essentially help protect them from being exploited, quite simply. And so that's part of what ForHumanity does, is we try to establish a series of risk mitigations and tools that can help protect vulnerable populations from this downside effect.
Sure. But it can't be all that bad. Surely you wouldn't be doing what you're doing for humanity if you wouldn't see some sort of upside of AI existence and implementation.
I would disagree with that, but only because of the mission statement that we've chosen to take. So, in other words, we take technology where it is, right? The people who have produced the technologies, they see some sort of benefit. That's why they've spent their time building it. What we see is, yeah, there may be benefit, and we want to measure that benefit as broadly as possible. But one of the ways that we can maximize the value of that benefit is by minimizing the risks associated with it. So we take a very specific perspective to focus on the negative impacts from these tools and how we can mitigate those risks, rather than the promotion of these tools. Now, the other thing that I would add to that is we do think that there are tools that are created that are just plain bad, and governments agree with us. And it's not that they're agreeing with us. They identify prohibited tools. We support every country's right to prohibit certain tools from being in the marketplace. Like under the EU AI Act, there's a prohibition of using social scoring, for example. And so the way or manner in which social scoring is used, the EU AI Act has said we're not going to allow for that. And what ForHumanity says is, that's great. We support your right to prohibit certain tools. We don't have our own list. We support the right of others to identify when those tools shouldn't be used.
Okay, so this is the organization. But you personally, do you see actual upside to the AI?
Do I see upside with AI? Sure. The ability to process large amounts of data beyond what a human is capable of doing can result in new information, new knowledge, and new wisdom. The ability to test more potential outcomes or use cases of processes and procedures increases with these tools. Let me give you a concrete example. If you have a disability and you are unable to drive a car, but you're able to get into an autonomous vehicle that can drive you to a location, that is an amazing advancement in a disabled person's mobility. Or let's take an example of someone who's lost the use of their arms. Okay, and those arms can be replaced and reconnected to the brain and give them full functionality back to a human level of dexterity with their hands. That's a miracle. We can discover treatments for illnesses that haven't yet been solved. Those are miracles. We celebrate those. What we want to be careful about is then creating, however, a superhumanness where we begin to allow humans, and this gets into the transhumanism discussion, but where we allow humans to then compete in their humanity and begin to have superhuman traits, superhuman hands, superhuman legs or body parts. Well, now there's a competition. Imagine having a brain implant in your head. You're a parent, and now you know that you're sending your child off to school. You're about to spend $500,000 or $600,000 on their education, an enormous sum. And you know that your son has to compete with all these other people. And by the way, half of those people have a brain implant that allow them to download their studies in advance. And your child does not have that. You're putting them at a disadvantage to other students. They have to compete harder. There's an emotional attachment to wanting to support and encourage your child to be able to be competitive. You may feel an enormous peer pressure to encourage a brain implant in your child. That's the kind of pressure that does not raise or improve well-being. And it's a schism that exists in society because you have a right to put that in your brain if you want to. We don't oppose anything like that. At the same time, we now have humans who are a disadvantaged minority because of their humanness. That is a problem for our society, and it's a problem we're not in a position to be able to deal with very well. So transhumanism is a huge challenge for our species over the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of two sides about transhumanism. I don't mind it in one way, but again, I personally, in my everyday life, I value my achievements as a person. I value the books I've read, the company I'm building, the knowledge I have gained, the sport achievements which I have achieved. Granted, like they're personal bests, but I value that. And that's where I have the problem of like Neuralink and the human machine interfaces. And again, AI, even to a lesser extent, as I said earlier, because it takes away all of this sense of achievement and sense of doing something for yourself, and you have everything at the end of your fingertip. But then it's not really your achievement. It's not really your action anymore. Like if you can just download like the whole library of books ever, well, like, okay, sure, you know the information, and that's more of a philosophical debate. You do know the information, but you didn't discover the information. You didn't read it. You didn't experience reading it and creating your own thoughts from it. Like my thoughts about what I've read, what I know, well, arguably they're probably the same to other people who read the same stuff. Well, plus or minus. But they were mine. I've created those thoughts. And like if you just download everything into your brain, it's like again, okay, I'm not sure how this would work. If it's completely unregulated. Like the hope is that, and again, I'm also of two sides about this. Like if it's regulated properly, sure, for the people who have Alzheimer's, for example, like the usage of uh, again machine interfaces to help them regain their faculties can be great. but then I don't really trust the government to regulate it properly, because practice usually shows
It's
the government gets it wrong.
it's all, yeah, it's also the humans. So we have lots of examples of this, and this is where I agree with you. And then unfortunately we never stop. Anytime a person is what I would call subhuman, and I don't say that pejoratively, I'm not trying to be critical of anyone. If you're an Alzheimer's patient or Parkinson's, and you have this debilitating disease, and we can return you to full human function, for us, that's a miracle, and it should be celebrated, and we should do it every time we can. So let's take Hugh Hare, who's a professor at MIT. Hugh lost his legs below his knees climbing Mount Washington, and he spent lots of money, research grants, and so on to essentially create cybernetic machines below his knees. And he now has superhuman function of his legs. Well, before that, when he didn't have those lower half of his legs, he was subhuman in the sense that he couldn't do the same thing that a normal human with those parts of their body could do. And again, not trying to be pejorative. When he takes those legs and cybernetically and puts them in place, that's a miracle. However, Professor Hare does not stop there. And then he has said publicly, and I hope some of you will be able to have these cybernetic legs in the future, meaning that there's a superhumanness to them. And that's the problem. When we take these tools and we return people to human function, miracle. When we take it past human function and become superhuman, that's when I begin to have a problem with it. And that's how we delineate these differences. And that's where society is not good at stopping. Someone out there will say, I'm going to use this tool and I'm going to make myself better. It's a competitive nature of our species. And now that creates and they use it, and they use it successfully. There's not many times that society agrees. Everywhere in the world, they agree on something, but they did with gene editing. The entire world said, you shouldn't gene edit a human. We're not ready for it. And yet 3 researchers in China and 1 researcher in the United States got together and they gene edited 2 babies and brought them to term.
Well, it was illegal though. And some of those researchers are in jail, as far as I understand. The Chinese.
Yeah, they are in jail. However, it's already been done. And now you know what happens from that result? Those babies in some ways will turn out fine, or they'll appear to be fine. And others will say, look over there. See, it was okay. Those babies turned out okay. And they'll begin to advance it. And then they'll push their governments to say, we should gene edit for these purposes. And they'll start to push the threshold. And that makes it more and more okay all around the world. And that is getting back to that point I made earlier about the autocracy of technology. In the end, a single person can make a choice to do something, and that leads to a slippery slope where many other people will adopt those technologies.
Well, it's also, the intentions can be good, but it's like, say you're moving west somewhere, and your only direction is to move west, and you need to get west. Well, the more west you go, eventually you're gonna leave the point which you're moving towards and move away from it. So say you're moving, say like you're in New York, you're moving to Chicago, well, direction. But eventually you're gonna be past Chicago, and your direction away from the Chicago will just keep on increasing. So it might be good what we're trying to do with the AI and the neural link, and perhaps even like gene editing to a certain extent, like stem cells research. I know those are controversial topics, but I mean, if it can improve somebody's lives, perhaps there is like a grain, a seed of something good in it. But if you take it just a bit way too fast, you're gonna get further away from your actual destination, which you tried to get it in the first place.
And some will choose to do that, and they have the right to do that. Some will choose to go too far, and I believe they have a right to do that. The problem I see is that we don't know when to stop. We never know when to stop, and we often don't stop before we find harm. And sometimes those harms are significant harms, and it may be too late to put the genie back in the bottle.
What are your predictions for, let's give two predictions, one for the next 2 years, and then other one which is maybe more broad, 10 years.
So I'm not going to make predictions per se. I'm going to tell you what we're going to work on. And what we're going to work on is we're going to work on making more and more governments and regulators provide guardrails, laws, enforcement around how these tools are deployed that are human-centric, supportive of informed users of these tools so that they're informed of the risks in advance of use. That we raise education and awareness about the efficacy of these tools, and that we see more and more basically governments and regulators passing laws that will enforce these guardrails. That will certainly happen over the next 2 years, and ForHumanity will support those efforts. Moving out 10 years, there's an explicit one. We believe that independent audit of AI systems should be mandatory for all AI, algorithmic, and autonomous systems. The main reason for that is that the very nature of knowing that a third-party independent reviewer will come and examine the work of an entity changes their behavior. There are many groups and companies that want to play by the rules, want to abide by good practices until they get busy, until they get distracted, until it becomes a little expensive, until it becomes hard. The nature of having a third-party independent auditor come in and say, did you complete this work, changes how we react. We don't like to fail. We don't like to have someone look at our work and go, this is incomplete. We've learned this through education over centuries. So the nature of having a third-party independent auditor assures, or more greatly assures, compliance with a set of rules that humanity establishes. And so we will advocate for independent audit in every jurisdiction around the world, that it becomes mandatory for those who are deploying these tools. And I do think that that will take many years, maybe not 10, but it will take a good amount of work to get that done.
One last question. Do you think, especially you said like you're going to talk to more governments to implement regulations and audits, governments are slow, AI development pretty fast, getting on the faster. Do you think you'll have the time to do it before it spirals out of control?
Yes, I do. I think that there are more eyeballs, more people paying attention. There's more interest in getting a hold of these issues and challenges. So I do think that that this is not the existential threat that some have argued. I think this is a systemic threat, and but it's not, we're not, my toes are not halfway over the edge of the cliff. Okay. I'm seeing the cliff from a distance, and we're not at the edge today. I reserve the right to continually reevaluate that, because as you're pointing out, technology is moving very quickly. And so it does become a challenge, but I don't think we're at the edge of the cliff in this moment today.
Sure. Well, thank you. Thank you thank you a lot for coming today, Ryan, and talking to us about like the ethics of AI and the dangers and importance of regulations. Where can people get in touch or get involved with the ForHumanity?
Happy to have people connect through LinkedIn. I generally accept most requests to connect through LinkedIn. You can also go to our website, which is https :// the normal stuff, forhumanity.center, and then there is a link called Get Involved. And getting involved with ForHumanity can mean a few limited things. One, you can join our Slack community, where everyone is given access to all of the work that we do. It is an open community of close to 1,400 people from 86 different countries. And that's how you can plug into who we are in our community. We also have ForHumanity University, which teaches and trains people about our audit process and the audit criteria itself, how to evaluate compliance, how to create compliance with these audit requirements. That's done through ForHumanity University. The courses at ForHumanity University are free, and the certification exams are something that you can pay for if you want to be certified in the end of the process. But more importantly, I'm more than happy to connect directly and help guide people on the journey that is this big community of ForHumanity.
Sure. Well, thank you.